Okay. Have this. Hi, everybody. As promised, this is Will Vaus here to talk about letters to Malcolm. Well, I don't know how much I promised, but I told him that I was hoping that we were going to be able to do this. So, Will's a great friend of ours with the C.S. Lewis Society in Chattanooga. And so Will's going to tell us just whatever's on his heart and mind about letters to Malcolm, which is the issue of the day. So there you go, Will.
Well, Letters to Malcolm, chiefly on prayer, is one C.S. Lewis book that I encountered, probably one of the latest ones I encountered, because I started with reading the Narnia stories when I was in 4th grade, so from the time I was 9.
Yeah.
So I would say it was probably when I was in college that I read it for the first time. And it wasn't one of those books that impressed me the first time
I know. Some people
I
don't
read
like
it.
it at all.
But, you know, it's really grown to be perhaps my favorite C.S. Lewis book.
Really?
Because it's on prayer, and because I find so many other books on prayer to be rather perfunctory, rather pedantic, shall we say.
Yeah.
And so I like Lewis's conversational tone that he establishes through, having these fictitious letters.
Mm-hmm.
And so that gets over that, and you just feel like he's sitting across the tea table from you, telling you about his prayer life, what he finds difficult, challenging, the things he needs to think through. And as with every C.S. Lewis book, it really does make you think. It challenges your thinking in so many different ways. Even though it's a thin book physically, it's a deep book spiritually. And so over the years, C.S. Lewis has become for me a spiritual guide. And when I read that book, I feel like he's acting as my spiritual director.
Yeah.
And guiding me in terms of my prayer life. And actually, a few years ago, I did have an actual spiritual director who's a Roman Catholic priest. And after meeting with him a few times, I realized that every time he asked me, when we would sit down together, he asked me how my prayer life was. And as someone who grew up in the evangelical fold, when someone would ask me that question, I would naturally think of my daily devotions.
Quiet time. Yeah.
Was I having a good quiet time? Which was actually a phrase I despised as a young person, I think because, not by my parents, but I think my youth pastor impressed the importance of that on many of us. And I was around people who emphasize the importance of having a daily quiet time. So it got to the point where I didn't really like that phrase.
Yeah.
But through many challenges I went through in college, I did find out the importance for myself. And it's different when you discover something for yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
How important it is to spend daily time reading scripture, praying. Lewis just took it for granted that if you're a Christian, you were going to do that.
Yeah.
So I realized with my Catholic priest friend that after a while I realized when he said prayer life, I thought of one thing, but he was talking about another. I thought of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, or whatever I spent every day reading the Bible and praying specifically for devotions, because of course as a pastor you spend a lot of time studying things for other people.
Right.
It's not the same. So I always felt inadequate. I always felt like I wasn't doing enough. But then I suddenly realized that my Catholic priest friend, Father Mario, when he said prayer life, he was talking about my whole life.
Yeah.
And my whole life, every day, being permeated by prayer. And I think that's the same point in many ways that C.S. Lewis gets across rather subtly, that prayer is meant to be part of our everyday life. That we're to carry on this sort of running conversation with the Lord. And if we do spend time set aside every day, maybe 5 minutes to read scripture and pray. That's just the launching pad for the rest of our life spent in prayer. And so I find that Letters to Malcolm, chiefly on prayer, is a good companion along that journey. Maybe another way to think of it is going on a walk with C.S. Lewis.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, we just went on a walk out to the pond that he used to swim in every day. And so for me, reading Letters to Malcolm is like going on that walk with C.S. Lewis and just talking back and forth about our lives and how prayer permeates.
That's great. That's great. Well, I appreciate it. Can I ask you one question?
Sure.
Walter, in the introduction to the book, or in his companion, I think it is, says that he thought it was one of Lewis's greatest work of apologetics. What's your reaction to that?
It depends on how you think of apologetics. You know, Lewis said that, you know, the work of defending the faith is important, but that especially for those who do spend their lives doing that, there needs to be a time where you come away from that and where you feed on the faith yourself. Yeah. That's where going to church and having Holy Communion and a prayer life and reading the Bible for yourself becomes so important, and that's what feeds, you know, a proper defense of the faith. But I think maybe what Walter meant is that you know, in Letters to Malcolm, you have this sort of much gentler, much subtler defense. In fact, when Walter was talking to us, I was going to remind him of something he told me about Billy Graham. When Billy Graham came to Oxford many years ago, and Walter heard him, and I can't remember, I think they may have even had a conversation together. But I do know that Walter said this to me, that he noticed that what Billy Graham did, because he felt self-conscious about speaking to university students when he didn't feel like he had that much education. He felt like these students at Oxford were so much sharper than he was. And so he tried to present, you know, intellectual reasons for the faith. And Walter says he wished that what Billy Graham had done was simply stand up and tell them what Jesus meant to him, you know, and talked about his personal relationship with Christ. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's what people most need to hear. And I think that's, in a way, what C.S. Lewis does in Letters to Malcolm, is he's talking about his personal experience, and it just flows through him. Yeah. He's not... Sometimes when you give a defense, you can sound defensive. Yeah. But there's nothing defensive about Letters to Malcolm. It's just who he is. He doesn't have to prove anything anymore. It's just a part of him.
Yeah, that's great. Listen, I need to let you go. Thanks so much for helping me out and sharing these things with our friends. Will, thank you.